welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is the first time that you are joining me. The Lovely Face recently did a video called Why I Have Multiple Decks, and I will link to her video in the description box below so you can check it out if you haven't already seen it. I really enjoyed it and I think it's a really great question and it's something really good to share with people. But before I get going, there is something that I wanted to address around this topic very, very quickly, which is basically this idea that seems to be permeating within certain members of the YouTube community who may or may not consider themselves part of the tarot community, and that's absolutely fine. That's not for me to argue. But there's this persistent idea that if you own a lot of tarot decks, you can't possibly be spiritual, or you can't possibly understand the tarot properly, or you're buying into or contributing to this idea of commercializing tarot, or somehow taking away from its spiritual veracity. And I think that whilst I do believe that every single person is entitled to share their opinion and to voice their opinion, whether I disagree with them or not, and that part of being a grown-up and being open-minded is about holding space for those opinions that you may not agree with, I think that it's important to remember, more so for those people who might be seeing those comments and feeling personally attacked by it or having some kind of emotional reaction to it, it's important to remember that it is just an opinion, and just because they are phrasing themselves as if they are stating matters of fact doesn't mean that they are stating matters of fact. Ultimately, as Brian Cormac Carr said in a video when he addressed this a while ago, all anybody can ever know about you if you own a lot of decks is that you like owning a lot of decks. That is it. It's not for someone else to judge how spiritual you are or aren't. And you don't need to justify what you do with your money to anybody else. Like, I work damn hard for my money. I will spend it on what I please, when I please. So I just wanted to get that out there because I've been seeing it a lot, and while it doesn't bother me because I don't know these people and have absolutely no vested interest in their opinions whatsoever, I do think that it can be damaging for people to hear those things stated as if they are a matter of fact, and as if these people have some kind of authority over what does and doesn't get classed as spirituality, and what tarot does and doesn't mean. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, for me, the reason I own a lot of tarot decks is because I believe that tarot is a language. And when an artist creates a tarot deck, they are communicating that language in a way that is unique to them and that is different from the way that any other artist is communicating that language. So I like to use analogies because I just do. So for me, it's like horror writing. I love horror writing. I'm a big fan of horror writing. And I could even go more specific and talk specifically about Stephen King. So Stephen King is a prolific writer. He writes an awful lot of books. And if we were to take the argument that is being thrown around about owning lots of decks and apply it to literature, which is just another form of communicating a language, then the argument that we are using is that because I've read one Stephen King book, I shouldn't buy or read any others. Which, frankly, if anybody said that to you, you would think was ridiculous. If I enjoy Stephen King, if I get some kind of nourishment or, satisfaction from engaging with his different works, why wouldn't I invest in them? Why wouldn't I invest my money and my time in them? Of course I would. The, Needful Things and Misery are two completely different stories communicating in completely different ways. And part of my love for Stephen King has grown out of the fact that by spending time with him in these different stories that he creates, with these different characters that he creates, with these different situations that he creates, I have learned over time to appreciate his work, to enjoy his work differently, and to recognize his work. You could read me a passage from a Stephen King and there's a strong chance that I would recognize that it was Stephen King, because I am so immersed in his world and his language and the way that he chooses to communicate that I have a very, very strong knowledge and understanding of his style and his world and his artistry. And tarot is no different. Tarot is different people telling stories in their own way, communicating their worlds and their stories and their characters in a way that's unique to them. And how you connect with those things is also going to be unique to you. And just as an example, I just wanted to show you two cards from well, one card, but from two different decks. So these are currently my two favourite decks. I love these decks. One I always knew I'd love, one I was really surprised about, but these are my top two decks right now, and it's the Hermit card. So this is the Hermit card from the Deviant Moon, and this is the Hermit card from the Everyday Witch. These cards, to me, tell completely different stories. They have completely different meanings. I connect to them in completely different ways. If they came up in a reading, I would read them in completely different ways. Even if they came up in the same reading, in the same position, I mean the same spread in the same position, not the same reading, I would still read them in completely different ways, because how this artist is choosing to interpret the Hermit card and choosing to communicate the meaning of their Hermit card is completely different to how this artist is doing it and what this artist is trying to communicate. And how I connect with their different styles and their different imagery is also completely different. So yes, it's perfectly possible to own one deck and to spend a long time with that deck and really going deep and really understanding the meaning and really, you know, that being the only deck that you ever read with and you ever connect with. But it's also possible to have that level of connection and that level of depth with multiple decks. So that's why I own multiple decks, because I appreciate the artwork, I appreciate the stories that the artists are telling, and I appreciate that people are communicating in that language in different ways. But I'd like to hear your truth, if you like. Why do you own lots of multiple decks? Or if you only own one, actually I'm not judging you here, and I do think that it's possible to go deep with only one deck. Let me know in the comments whether you only work with one deck, whether you work with multiple decks, whether you collect decks just because you damn well want to and it's your money and you'll spend it however you like. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care everyone and lots of love. Bye bye.